Cabinet meeting, and we may speak to you later on. Here in the studio is the Conservative MP Kit Morehouse. Welcome to the studio. You must have travelled on a few planes with Boris Johnson in your time working with him when he was mayor.
Yeah, a couple of times we went overseas. We had a very successful trade mission to China, where I didn't fly out with him, but flew back with him, yes.
And what's he like on a plane? Does he like to just go to sleep, or was he chatting all the way?
Yeah, we all slept. It was an overnight flight back, so we were all fast asleep. He was very, very active, as I recall, in China. I mean, he's a brilliant person to travel with. And, of course, went down very well, and that contributed to some of the financial success that we're seeing in London now.
Right,
the enormous Chinese investment in London.
Have you spoken to him over this furore regarding his vision on Brexit?
No. Not before or since, no, I haven't. And to be honest with you, I'm slightly surprised at the level of furore, I guess. Some of us wrote a not dissimilar article in the Telegraph at the start of the summer, which amazingly was unreported.
But he's the Foreign Secretary, I suppose, not wanting to demean your position in any way.
And I slightly, I guess, don't understand quite the furore, given that his piece was largely kind of on message and reinforcing everything that the Prime Minister has said so far. I guess it looked to me like he was trying to inject a bit of fizz into the debate. And one of the frustrations, I mean, I voted Leave. One of the frustrations, I guess, that those of us on the Leave camp have is that the kind of overwhelming narrative about Brexit in the media has been almost entirely negative, and we need to recapture that sense of idealism about what the opportunities that Brexit holds for us.
Is it just the responsibility of the media? I mean, Theresa May hasn't exactly been enthusiastic about Brexit, or hasn't voiced it publicly, nor have other members of the Cabinet. So do you think that has contributed to Boris's frustration?
Yeah, I think probably, and I would hope that the speech tomorrow, and it is a seminal moment, everybody's quite right to concentrate on it and talk about how it's being drafted and all that stuff, because it is going to be very important. And I do hope she tries to capture some of the sense of idealism, as I say, an opportunity that Brexit presents, not just for us, but for the rest of the world, with whom we are able to engage much more freely now.
Has she been too downbeat about Brexit?
I don't think necessarily downbeat. I'm just not sure that the optimism of it has cut through. I mean, you've got to remember, the government and senior ministers are dealing with what is an incredibly complex negotiation. And in that complexity, when you're deep in the weeds of, reciprocal health care and access to confidential papers and goods in the market, it's quite hard to forget that it's quite easy to forget, that the public needs some kind of idealistic vision presenting to them about what the collective mission is.
Are you optimistic about Brexit?
I'm not optimistic about it, nor do I see this idealistic vision. Actually, perhaps Kit and I agree about that, although he thinks there is one and I don't think there
Why not?
is one. Well, I see this as the beginning of a long, slow, no great Armageddon moment, but long, slow decline into insularity and irrelevance. The great tragedy is that it's quite clear the government itself is completely split about this. And I guess we're destined to go on like this for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't know how long Boris is going to last in the Cabinet. He's got quite a low boredom threshold, I think, so he may find being Foreign Secretary is a bit boring for him. Right. Most people wouldn't find that, I have to say.
Right. See, I have to confess to be mystified by that attitude from... I mean, Chris is a long-standing socialist, and quite rightly so, if those are his beliefs and all the rest of it. And to see yourself as allied to this essentially corporatist racket, which is quite obviously declining in economic importance, certainly in terms of share of world trade, where young people in the southern half of the EU have been thrown on the scrap heap for 2 generations now by the demands of central banking union. I'm amazed. I mean, we all know that, McDonnell, Corbyn, all those people voted against the EU again and again and again for 30 years. And I'm surprised at that you don't see at least the opportunity to battle.
Are you betraying left-wing socialist thought on this?
I don't think I am, no. I think most Labour supporters are actually overwhelming in favour of remaining in the EU, if only. I don't disagree that things need changing in the EU, but it's the hell of a risk to take, jumping over the cliff edge, when it constitutes such a large part of our relations with the outside. Well, now, if you think you can make it all up by deals with China and India and America, good luck to you, but I personally am sceptical.
Well, and there's been talk about 20 billion euros being mooted in this speech, or certainly an amount that Theresa May is going to make a sort of generous and open offer. Do you think that's the right thing to do in tomorrow's speech, to try and unlock the negotiations?
Well, I think it's worth making some kind of an outline offer, yes. I mean, you quite rightly posited the fundamental problem with the negotiation, which is the EU wants to see the money first,
Yep.
and we want to see what we're buying first. And in the end, the truth is, as said before, nothing's agreed till everything's agreed. So it's perfectly possible for the Prime Minister to give a kind of outline region in which we're willing to pay. But until we get to the end and we see what the full deal is, there's no reason that can't be changed. So if we get to the end of
So it could be more, in fact.
Well, it could be less. So we might get to the end of the negotiation and we say, right, let's talk about the free trade agreement. And they say, well, do you know what, we're not going to allow Stilton and pork pies onto the continent. And we'll say, well, OK, we're not going to pay 20 billion then.
But what
and
do you
that would be the iteration at the end.
What do you make then of the sentiment that has come out of Number 10, reports that the UK will pay an amount to ensure the EU is not out of pocket? I mean, the EU is going to be out of pocket when we leave because we're a net contributor, unless, of course, we are going to pay an amount to the EU in perpetuity.
Well, my assumption is they're talking about the current budget timetable up to whatever it was, 2022, I think is the current budget.
2020.
2020, sorry. So from my point of view, as somebody who voted leave, what I would like to see is not just a figure plucked out of the air. I'd like to see a kind of scientific reasoning about why we're paying what we're paying.
Right.
Now,
do you think 20 billion has been plucked out of the air?
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen the methodology. I mean, there is this fabled meeting, apparently, where one of our civil servants took apart the claims of the EU to larger numbers and looked at it legally and forensically. But don't forget, we also have a share of large assets in the EU. We're a shareholder in the EIB. That's worth 10 billion quid.
So should we be
ensuring
that the EU is not out of pocket?
Well, we should ensure that the settlement is a fair one, both in terms of the scientific methodology of calculating it, but also, frankly, ethically. I'm for an ethical exit, in that these are our friends and partners. We don't want to exit on the basis that it causes them problems, on the basis that they don't want to cause us problems. If that means that a bit of money in the system will lubricate that, then that's fine by me. And also, we have to talk about how long we would pay it over.
Right. Well,
right? So
are you happy for it to
borrow a lot
go?
of money for your house. If you had to pay it on day one, then you wouldn't buy the house, but you pay it over 25 years.
But we are now entering the sort of third round of negotiations, or it is going to be happening in October, and arguably no one knows what Britain's actual position is on the shape of Brexit.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, we've now issued quite a lot of position papers about detailed areas of Brexit.
Have you read
that
those?
need to be good. I've read a few of them, yes. I haven't, to be fair, read them all.
I've read a few of them.
They
and
had
I'm
a
not
very good one on science and innovation a couple of weeks ago, which I wrote, which was brilliant. Emollient, cooperative, looking for a constructive relationship, and I think the rest of them, certainly the ones I've read, have been in the similar tone.
Do you think Boris blinked over the sort of talks, if you like, with Theresa May, that in the end he has backed down and he will be standing loyally beside her in Florence tomorrow?
I haven't heard or seen anything from him that's been anything other than loyal. Now, I know that it was August. A lot of the reports that we're getting in the paper and here are all sources close to, senior friends of. I have no idea who these people are.
Right.
So I'm unable to judge.
So you don't think he'll walk at any point?
I'd be very surprised if he did, yeah.
Right. I mean, in terms of how this speech is going to be received tomorrow, do you see it as a seminal moment, or actually do you think much will change?
I see it as an interesting moment, and hopefully she will put a bit of flesh on the bone. I don't disagree with anything Kit said about our need to make an ethical exit. Presumably we will have one or two long-term obligations, such as EU pensions, but I don't think that will be controversial either. So I don't see why some sort of settlement shouldn't be reached, though there is a wing of Kit's party especially, not only them though, that is unlikely to be happy with almost any amount spent on the separation. And I've no doubt they'll give trouble in due course, if they're not already.
I have to confess, I haven't come across anybody really who thinks that. I mean, there are certainly people who think we should pay, absolutely scientifically what we're entitled to. And of course, there is this slightly strange...
well, Boris Johnson did say at one stage, go whistle on the money altogether.
He said go whistle about 100 billion, to be fair. That was when 100 billion was being bandied around. I mean, there is this slightly strange idea that we should pay for access to the single market. That's where there will be some dispute. Now, of course...
Do you think we should?
Well, no, because paying for access to the single market is when you pay for access to somebody's market, it's called a tariff. And so to pay a lump sum in exchange for no tariff seems bonkers to me. We should think about having a free trade arrangement where they have access to our market.
Although Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, has said it should be jobs first, and it should avoid a shutdown on immigration. And if that means paying for access to the single market, that would be fine.
But we don't have to pay for access to the single market. We're WTO members, so are the EU. If we left the WTO terms, we get access, same as the Americans and the Japanese and all the others get access. The idea of paying a lump sum to be able to trade is why we would have tariffs.
Kit Malthouse, thank you very much. Now,